Give me some key macro variables that you went into this particular report for this current year, 2021. We're right now in the middle of the year.
We were discussing how Nigeria has exited a recession on the growth side, and that's good news. Now, the not so good news is that inflation, it's very high right now, and it has been rising steadily since August 2019, when the government closed its land borders. So inflation is particularly important. That's a key macroeconomic variable that we highlight in the report because it reduces the purchasing power of ordinary Nigerians. Just to give you one example, right? A year ago in April 2020, with 1,000 naira, a household was able to buy 6 kilograms of maize. Today, they can only buy 4 kilograms of maize. So that is a very real statement, and it has been translating into all the economy, and of course, it's something that we care about a lot. Now, just to highlight those linkages, Shubham already mentioned how inflation is resulting into higher poverty, and what we wanted also to highlight in the report are other indicators that are non-monetary. So let me give you one example, and that's food insecurity. A year ago, before COVID, you had around 6% of between 6 to 7% of Nigerian households that had an adult that went without eating for an entire day. That's a very significant number. However, today, that number has reached to over 18%. So 18% of households where you have an adult that went without eating for an entire day. And I think that highlights the importance of understanding that all macroeconomic indicators do have also a particular linkage about on the micro side on what people face on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, Marco. So this report, the report says inflationary pressures is beginning to persist at least for the next 6 months and will exceed 16% in 2021. Today we got the Statistics Office releasing inflation at about 17%, north of 17%. So you think inflation is going to remain highly elevated until the end of the year, 2021?
What we do see is that inflationary pressures are expected to go down during the end of the second quarter, the third quarter of 2021. That's good. However, with inflation at above 15% or even 10%, it is still outside of the target that the government wants to have. And of course, the higher the level of inflation, the faster that purchasing power is eroded. So what we highlight in the report is the importance of implemented a series of linked policies on the trade side, on the monetary side, on the fiscal side, also to address not only the factors that are increasing the supply of food, which do include measures or things that have happened for some time now, like insecurity, but also to make sure that the price of food is cheaper for people. And you know, the issue of trade is an important one to highlight, because we do see a very clear indication that the closure of land borders and other trade restrictions have had a negative effect when it comes to the price of food.
There are a few optimistic sound bites in this report. Shubham, the country director, give me your list of fiscal considerations for Nigeria on this very slippery road to stronger recovery. For example, the report says current account deficit for Nigeria will narrow to about 5% of GDP. How do you think Nigeria will be able to achieve this, looking at the entire macroeconomic environment right now?
So let me begin with, on the fiscal side, I think the priorities are clear and the government is fully aware of this. Number one priority is mobilizing revenues. This is the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative. Nigeria has about the lowest revenue to GDP ratio of any country in the world. It's about 8% in a good year. It was much lower last year. So, and without the revenues, the government does not have the fiscal resources to truly invest in people, in the human capital, in the critical infrastructure, and in security, the basic law and order functions. So I would say priority number one is mobilizing revenues and doing so in a way that is seen to be fair and as acceptable to ordinary Nigerians. Priority number two on the fiscal side is to redirect expenditures from expenditures that only benefit a few to expenditures that will benefit the many, and in particular the poor, who are about half of the population. And what's the number one priority for redirecting expenditures? PMS subsidies. PMS subsidies are about 100 billion naira a month right now. given the price of oil. And if the price of oil continues to go up, PMS, the 100 billion naira will also grow. And this is 100 billion naira that could be coming into the Federation account and then be redirected towards, name your favorite cause. Could be primary health care, could be basic education, could be a rural road. But that's not coming in right now. And these subsidies are benefiting largely a small segment of the population at the top. And so these are the kinds of fiscal choices, and electricity tariffs would be another one. The cost of having electricity tariffs remain below what it costs to provide the power. So these are the choices on the fiscal side that I think the government is very aware of and took some bold moves, steps on in 2020. We are very hopeful that on this front that we will see further progress, and that trade-off, and essentially it's a contract to take the fiscal resources that are being used on these kinds of subsidies, redirecting them towards pro-poor expenditures that benefit the many.
Shubham, what are you strongly optimistic about in your projections for Nigeria in 2021? Give me the strongest point.
I think on the government's management of its fiscal situation, it will be a very tough ride, but I think progress on these reforms are what I personally am most optimistic about.
I want Marco to take me through some of the recommendations, looking at the to-do list in a manner of speaking on both the fiscal side and on the side of the monetary side, on the central bank. I saw in your report that there's a need for Nigeria to set up what you called fiscal and monetary coordination council. That sounds very interesting to me, while you knock the central bank around a little bit when it comes to exchange rate. So my question, Marco, is this. Give me your headline point here when it comes to the monetary side of immediate priorities for the Nigerian authorities.
So we believe that the immediate priority is to reduce inflation and to do so in a way that it promotes economic growth going forward so that the recovery continues at the same time that we protect the poor. There are millions of Nigerians right now that are living in poverty or very close to the poverty line, and they're being heavily affected by what's happening on inflation. So that is the immediate priority. What we highlight in the Nigeria Development Update is a series of 6 areas that, if combined, will not only help to reduce inflation, but doing so in a way that also ensures sustained recovery. And that includes improvements in exchange rate management, improvements in fiscal management, in monetary policy, the trade aspect that I highlighted before. It's critical, and to do so, those policies in combination with policies that would help to ensure the protection of the poor, for example, through conditional cash transfer programs that are targeted and that are well defined, and also specifically targeted support to micro and small enterprises that right now are also facing difficulties, for example, accessing credit. So just to give you a few examples, I think there is a role to play from the fiscal authority side, from the central bank, very important role to play there, and also on the role that the private sector and development partners can also play in support, in coordination, and in collaboration and communication of these reforms to the public. Many of these are sensitive in nature. Shubham already highlighted the gasoline subsidy, the electricity tariff reform. These are things that we believe have to happen in order to create fiscal space that is much needed to combat the pandemic, but are also things that will require a broad consensus so that they can be sustained across time. I want to commend the central bank for the recent move that they have on the unification of exchange rate. They have adopted the NAFEX rate, which is the rate at the investors and exporters window, as their anchor rate. This is very important, and we believe that it would help to boost the competitiveness of the economy, and also it will help to reduce inflation. But at the same time, we do see an opportunity to keep going forward, not only on the monetary side, but across all policy areas.